This is the Plant Yourself podcast. I'm Howard Jacobson of plantyourself.com and the Big Change Program with Josh Lajani. This podcast is part of my mission to help you live an active and achievement-filled life. Couple quick items of business before we get to today's interview. First, the Oatmeal Project is back. The Oatmeal Project is a report that I wrote a while ago, and it's about oatmeal. And it's about how to handle breakfast in case you're looking to transition to a whole food plant-based diet and you find it overwhelming and you just want to handle one meal during the day, which is actually a third pretty much of all the meals you're going to eat during the day. And I just wrote a simple report on how to make it really, really simple, to have variety, to keep it healthy, and it's called the Oatmeal Project. And I won't tell you what the main ingredient is because that's a secret, but you can probably guess from the title. So you can get that at plantyourself.com/oatmeal. It's free, and you also get a complimentary subscription to the Big Change Bulldog, my weekly-ish newsletter that I haven't sent out actually the entire month of August, I think. So I've got a backlog of stuff to put in there. And that's, again, plantyourself.com/oatmeal, all lowercase. Second thing, big thanks to all my supporters on Patreon who are inching me towards my goal of not subsidizing the podcast myself, but making it a self-sustaining thing. If you want to support the podcast in that way, to give back to the community and to acknowledge the value you get from the work that I do, which averages about 10 hours a week, you can go to plantyourself.com and click on the Patreon button on the right sidebar, or you can just go to Patreon, that's patreon.com/plantyourself. Either way, you'll get to the same spot, and you can make a contribution that reflects your perception of the value that you get from the podcast, the value of my time in putting it together, and your current financial resources. So, only give what you are really comfortable not missing. And of course, if you do become a sustaining patron of the show, even at $1 a month level, you get access to all the healthy habit huddles that I have ever done and will ever do as long as you remain a patron. Last month, I did one on self-criticism and self-compassion, and I have one queued up on gratitude, and they are designed to help you get healthy habits into your life. All right, let's talk about today's guest. Bernie Roth is an incredibly smart and charming human being. He's co-founder and academic director of the Hasso Plattner Institute of Design at Stanford University, which is known much more commonly as the D.School, the Stanford D.School. It's a famous hotbed of design, of innovation, of entrepreneurship, and Bernie is one of the founders. I first came across his work through his book, The Achievement Habit, Stop Wishing, Start Doing, and Take Command of Your Life. I was listening to it as an audiobook while I was preparing a potato bed. And I listened to it because it was sort of a business book and about how to design businesses and things like that. And as I was listening, it occurred to me that Bernie would make a great guest on my friend Peter Bregman's Bregman Leadership podcast. So I suggested that Peter get in touch with him. He did, and a few weeks later had produced and published an interview with Bernie on his podcast. And it was then that I listened to that interview that I thought, wow, Bernie would be a great guest on the Plant Yourself podcast. And it's kind of funny how I didn't think that originally, but only through the filter of Peter's questions. And here's why. Bernie's great contribution to the world, aside from his numerous inventions and innovations in machine design, robotics, and engineering, is the insight that successful, happy, healthy people generally don't achieve these nice things by accident. Instead, they apply design principles to their lives, and they make the good stuff happen. Now, they don't formally recognize that what they're doing is informed by design thinking most of the time. But once you meet Bernie, you'll see that the things you want to achieve, whether they are a clean diet, an exercise habit, a better relationship, a more lucrative and meaningful career, these can all be approached as design problems rather than pipe dreams. So in the interview, Bernie and I discuss how to apply his work to the goal of making sustainable, healthy lifestyle changes. And I hope you find his wisdom and his techniques as valuable as I do. So without further ado, Bernie Roth, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Thank you.
So I wanted to talk to you because I have spent the last few years of my life helping people get healthier and, change habits, behaviors, lifestyles, diet. And I picked up your book kind of as a business book. Like I was interested in it for myself in terms of I was having some struggles like designing my own business and how it was going to work. But the more I listened, the more I realized that your type of thinking really could lend itself in a profound and kind of revolutionary way to the work I was doing with other people. So that's why I wanted to talk to you about.
That sounds interesting. Glad to talk to you about it.
Great. So, one thing that I got from the book, and we'll get into, I hope, all the elements, is that like you had a pretty rough childhood, and it's not the sort of childhood that one would think, this person is going to become an influential engineer, designer, inventor, educator. And yet at some point you discovered for yourself that life was something that could be designed rather than just, experienced as a bystander or a victim. Can you kind of give us a sense of from the early years to how that happened?
Yeah. Well, it happened gradually, and it happened, I had sort of a not very distinguished youth in the Bronx, and got into a lot of difficulty, and was not interested in school, and essentially almost flunked out. And so at one point at school, they were about to flunk me out, and I said, well, I'm not that stupid. And I sort of settled down and went from being essentially straight D to straight A, and then kept going into graduate school, which totally confounded me that I would do that, and ended up really liking the academic world. And then I became a professor and came out to Stanford with a very sort of straight engineering background that, the only thing I was a designer, but designing machines and eventually robots and that kind of thing. And I started to notice that the people around me, Silicon Valley was a very different place then than it is now. And a lot of people, especially ex-students, graduated, and they always talked about going into their own business, and they didn't. They mainly went to work for big companies like Hewlett-Packard and some like Ampex and Raychem, which don't exist anymore. And basically, it reminded me really of this O'Neill play, The Iceman Cometh, where everyone's in the bar for the entire play, and they keep talking about leaving and crossing the street, and no one ever leaves. And so I had the sense that maybe part of what I do, it should be to give people an opportunity to get past this kind of pipe dream and to really get to do what they think they want to do. And so I designed a course which was sort of ahead of its time in those days, where I essentially was using the methods I had learned on machines, but on people. And I had a project in the class where you had to do something you've always wanted to done but never done before. And it could be anything. It didn't have to do with anything with engineering. Most of the cases it didn't. And there was another thing I noticed, is that a lot of them had problems in their lives that I felt should have been solved by their parents, or somehow when they grew up. They shouldn't be at this late age still having this junk around. And so I made the other possible project they could choose is to get rid of a problem in their life. And those two ideas turned out to be really instrumental in a lot of people's lives. And I've taught that course for well over 40 years. And then when we created the D.School, I actually changed it a little bit and brought it into the D.School. Basically, it's this whole idea of dealing with yourself in the idea that you can control your life. life, and you can design things it's essentially problem solving. You can problem solve them, and you learn from success. So if someone did a little project and it was successful, they could build on it. And the idea is a very strong and powerful idea. And it's been growing and growing. And the book I wrote is sort of the culmination of all those ideas brought together.
Yeah. Now, one thing I love about design thinking, at least as it's applied traditionally, is, when you were young, you made a bottle cutter.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you're playing with external parts. You've got your fuse so you don't blow up the apartment. You've got the string and the flame and all that. And it's not personal. But when somebody wants to change themselves and they look at themselves in the mirror every day and they say, I don't like how I look, I don't like how I feel, and I've done it to myself by making crappy decisions, it's not like they're playing with parts they can get at Radio Shack. How do you apply design thinking to something that's so personal and potentially painful?
Yeah, well, actually, one of the things that is the hallmark of design thinking versus normal design and normal engineering kind of thing is that it's human-centered. And there's this thing called empathy in it. So we'll call the problem solver the designer. And the designer's job is to get into the shoes of the person or people he or she is designing for. So this whole idea is that you design for others and you're only successful if you really know what they're all about. Okay, well, you could take that same thing and turn it into yourself, which hadn't been done very much, but now it's becoming more fashionable. So it's the same idea of looking at what you really need, what you really want, and seeing what's kind of stopping you from it. And what I found is that really what stops most people is that they're working on the wrong issue. They really don't have the right issue in mind, and there are ways to get to the right issue. So most people are smart enough to figure out their problems. I mean, it's so obvious when I do a lot of groups and creativity and all that. And it's so obvious when I have a room full of people and someone comes up with their earth-shaking problem that they have no idea how to solve. Everyone else in the room can see right through it immediately. But then when your turn comes, you can't see through it. So it's this whole idea of being able to step out and see yourself not with the eyes of others and being able to help yourself. So it's not that we're helpless. So one thing is it a pipe dream, or do you really want to do it? So if it's a pipe dream, that's fine. It may or may not happen, and who cares? But if it's something you really want to do, you have to you have to have the intention to do it, and you have to give it some attention. So you have to be clear what you want to do, and you have to be clear that you have to take the time and the effort and whatever it takes to do that. So that's kind of where it's about. But the problem with, even if you get that, most people don't end up with the right problem. So I'll give you an anecdote, which is just perfect. So there's a woman who she writes for the New York Times, and Tara Parker Pope's her name, and she has a column. It's sort of a science column, and it's a health column. Maybe you read it because of your work. And around New Year's, way before New Year's, she decided she was going to try and do a New Year's Eve column because, everyone makes resolutions and they never carry them out. So she thought she would do something about that. And someone advised her that she could talk to me in that I know something about problem solving. So she called me up out of the blue and she said, hey, could you give me some ideas for the problems I could give my readers and something we could work on through my column? And I said, well, we don't really work that way. We don't really give people problems. We really find out what their issues are, and then we reframe them. So she said, well, could you give me an idea? I said, well, tell me really what you're losing sleep about. What's really bothering you in your life? And she said, well, this is embarrassing, but I've put on so much weight that I don't go out anymore. I just stay at home and nerd out with my deadlines and my columns and books. And we just had a reunion of my college, and I love those people, and I just was ashamed to go there. So I said, okay, so have you tried to lose weight? She said, yeah, I've tried everything. So I said, okay, so what we say is, what would it do for you if you solved your problem? Okay. What would it do for you if you lost weight? She said, well, then I could have a social life. So I said, well, what we would do is forget about losing weight. You've already tried that. Doesn't work. What you want to do is work on getting a social life. And she said, okay, let me think about that. We hung up and I didn't hear from her for a long time. And then I get an email that says, look in next Tuesday's New York Times. And there's this article by her saying, I spoke to this professor and he told me what I just told you. And I did that. I went out and I lost 25 pounds. So the point simply is that instead of staying home and eating, you know how we were neurotic and we were always eating stuff we shouldn't and all that, she went out and got a little bit of a social life and it broke the spell. And that's what it is most of the time. You have to reframe. If you're smart enough, I'm smart enough, your listeners are smart enough to solve most of their problems. And they do. Everyone solves a lot of problems. You and I connected here. We're talking. You know, you have your blog. You do a lot of things. I do a lot of things. But yet we both lose sleep over lots of stuff, which is not peace in the world. It's not Donald Trump. It's very personal stuff we lose sleep over, okay? And how come smart people like us can't solve those problems? And what I found out that in most cases is because it's the wrong problem. It's like losing weight when the real problem is social life. And that goes on over and over again. I'll give you another example. I was doing a workshop for some Stanford alum up in the Sierra Mountains. And this woman's big problem in life was how to get her boyfriend to stop snoring. And they had tried everything. And she just couldn't get gone to doctors and just couldn't get her to stop snoring. So I said, well, what would it do for you if you stopped snoring? If you stopped him from snoring? She said, well, I'd get a good night's sleep. So I said, well, the problem is get a good night's sleep. If that's the problem, it opens up the solution space tremendously, right? What are some solutions? Well, the first one that comes to my mind is, of course, get a different boyfriend or go to a different room or, you know, wear earplugs. I mean, there's a million possible solutions. So when you reframe that way, you actually open up the solution space tremendously. And most of the times the solution is right in front of you. Okay, so and you can do that with anything, and the kinds of issues that you're interested in are beautiful for that way. You know, so if someone says, I don't know, give me an example of a problem that one of your listeners would face that you want to help them get solved.
Sure. Well, a lot of people who listen to my show are already committed to eating a certain way, eating a sort of a very plant-based diet with limited or no animal products.
Yeah.
And they find that they believe it, they watch the movies, they listen to the doctors, they read the books, and they still go out and eat foods that they feel like they shouldn't, and then they feel ashamed, and they're in this cycle of being out of control for their health and feeling like they're not living in accordance with the values that they profess.
And then they feel badly about it, and that's sort of the New Year's resolution kind of issue.
Right, and if we ask them about it, they would say, no, the problem is exactly that I can't control what I eat, and there's no meta problem. That's it. So I can feel them.
But there is a meta problem. The problem is that, let's say the problem is, how do I control what I eat? That's the problem. How do I control what I eat? And my question is, what would it do for you if you can control what you ate? And then you're going to get some things, it may vary somewhat, but I would imagine it's something like I'd be healthier or I'd feel better, or I don't know, somewhere in that ballpark. Okay.
Right. I'd feel better. I'd be healthier. Okay. My body would be the right size. Okay. And I would feel.
Okay. So let's pick one of them. Okay. So if it's like my body being the right size, it could be any one of them, but if it's my body being the right size, then the idea would be, forget about this other stuff. It's not working for you. Then just work on getting your body the right size. And that probably involves other things than what you're talking about, you see. Now, the problem is, this is the problem, because I see you're not smiling. And the problem is, I have this problem, especially with Stanford freshmen a lot, okay? They're so used to solving the problem that if I disappear the problem for them, they're unhappy, but you haven't solved the problem. But the whole idea is if you disappear a problem, it's a much higher level than solving a problem. Because if you solve a problem, it can come back to bite you. But if it's no longer an issue in your life, you get the idea? If it's no longer an issue in your life that the boyfriend snores or doesn't snore, it doesn't matter. That's not going to come back to bite you at all. You get the idea? So you have to get to something which will handle the issue you really want. And most of the time, you can handle it. I mean, most people handle things in their life all the time. We handle hundreds of things. So you have to ask yourself, why is it this one thing I'm losing sleep over my inability to control what I eat, in other words, to eat healthy, that I want to, and yet I don't? And I think the problem is, if you look at it, you're really doing it not to eat healthy per se. You're doing it because you want it to bring you something else into your life, like a body change shape, or I don't know, whatever it is you want. You don't want to have diabetes. You want to have whatever the issues are. And if you work on that issue rather than the one you're unable to, I mean, if you can work on the original one, that's fine, great, solve it, and get a good night's sleep, and we don't have to worry about it. You eat healthy and go on with your life. Fine. But if you're really losing sleep over it, and you've tried to do that, you've tried to leave the bar, you're in the bar and you're just not leaving the bar, you just keep drinking, then what you have to do is reframe the problem. And then most of the time, the solution is so easy, and it disappears. I have a great story from my own life. I was near an age when people used to have to retire. It's in the book. I don't know if you remember it, but it's kind of toward the end. And I was teaching this kind of thing. I was in Sweden at the time at like the MIT of Sweden, KTH, and I was losing sleep literally because I couldn't figure out whether to retire or not. I couldn't figure out because there was an option at that time. The law had changed, and you could retire at the expected age or you could not. I was literally losing sleep. And in the middle of doing this workshop, I thought to myself, well, if I really believe in this stuff, I ought to apply it to myself. So that night I went home and I applied it to myself. And I said, well, what would it do for me if I could stop worrying about whether to retire or not? What would it do for me if I stopped worrying, if I solved it, if I decided whether to retire or not? And what came up was I could stop worrying about it. So the problem was not to decide. The problem was now, how do I stop worrying about it? Well, how do you stop worrying about something? Well, it was so simple. It just disappeared from my life because I realized I didn't have to solve that problem. Nobody cared. I had made up this societal issue that people were waiting for my decision. Nobody was waiting for my decision. Nobody cared. And at that moment, literally, it disappeared from my life. And literally, this is many, many years after, and I have not once thought about retiring or not retiring. It's so interesting. It just disappeared. And it's this issue that I brought in because I felt society required. And most issues are that way. They're things we're dealing with the wrong issue. It's so easy to, another one, just to give you one more, and then I'll let you talk. I had a woman her thing she was losing sleep over was getting her daughter into a good college. Okay. Right. And the question was, she just couldn't sleep. It was just annoying her. And the question is, what would happen to you if you had got your daughter into a good college? She said, well, then I wouldn't have any anxiety. So the issue is, how she gets rid of her anxiety? Because if she got her daughter into a good college, she'd worry about who her daughter was sleeping with or what her daughter was majoring in. The anxiety will always find something to be there. So getting the daughter into college wouldn't change the real problem anyhow. You know what I mean? So that's an example over and over and over again. I have hundreds of examples like that, and it really works. But it's really hard. You have to be not like a Stanford freshman. You have to be willing to let the problem disappear or solve it if it's a different problem.
Right. So I love that you reflected back to me that I wasn't smiling at first, because I could hear myself going in a direction that was a dead end. So, as I was listening to you, I was trying to solve the problem for myself and for these people. And what wasn't working for me was, if you don't fix the food, you're really not going to be able to fix the diabetes or the weight issue in a healthy way. And so I thought, well, so the problem is staying there. But then I realized that what you're really getting, what almost everyone gets if they control what they eat, is peace of mind.
Yeah.
And so I think at that point the new problem becomes, how do I make peace with my life so I don't have to use food to escape from it?
Well, that's one way, and that's I don't think it's going to be one answer for everybody. I think all your listeners are like you, they're all human beings, and all human beings come in with a tremendous variety. So it's for different people it's different things, but you have to open up the conversation with yourself about reframing, and you have to open up yourself. What is it you really want? And we have a class which deals with health, and what they do in it's a D.School class, and we have some doctors who participate in it, and they bring their patients in, and they bring in patients who are at risk from diabetes and obesity and issues like that. And the way the class works is we pair the patients with students, with Stanford graduate students. And each patient is paired with a Stanford graduate student, and their job is essentially to help the patient get healthy behavior, okay? And part of it, we hope the students are also going to get healthy behavior by teaching, and it's sort of like a program of giving up alcohol. So you have like a sponsor. So students like this person's sponsor, basically, and they kind of keep tabs on it. Well, see, that's a way. If, for example, if I said to myself, well, what would it do for me if I had healthy? Well, I'd have more control over my life. So now I said, how do I get more control over my life? Well, one way is to get a sponsor to work with me, not do it on myself. I mean, there are lots of ways of getting more control over your life. So it's going to, if you're really defeated by the thing and you really have the intention of doing it and you're giving it the attention it requires and it's still not working, then you've got to reframe the problem. You're just blowing into the wind. If you just stick day and night, you're not going to get a new idea. We have something like 60,000 or 80,000 thoughts a day. Most of them are repeated thoughts. So if this is an issue, you keep going over, you're not going to in the middle of the night get the light bulb, the aha. You've already been there. You can't keep replaying the movie and expect a different ending. It's always going to be the same ending. So, but you can change you can change it if you change the script in the middle. And what you have to do is this reframing is a wonderful way to do that. And literally, it kind of, if you draw it out, you just see the solution space just opens up tremendously. It just and people, it's the wrong problem. One of my favorites is this woman who was looking for a good man. And what would it do for her if she had a good man? Well, she'd have companionship. Well, looking for companionship is different than looking for a good man. Companionship, there are lots of things. There's dogs, there's cats, there's jobs, there's going to jail, join the army, go listen to your blog or whatever it is. There's a million ways to get companionship. And the irony is, if she found a good man, he might not give her companionship. I'm not giving my wife companionship now. I'm talking to you. It's a problem in my life. I don't give my wife as much companionship as she wants. So if she married for companionship, she got a lemon. You know what I mean? So even getting a good man won't solve. It's not the right problem often. So it's really interesting. If you can't solve it, it's usually not the right problem. And if it's not the right problem, solving it won't help you because you won't get what you want. So it's more complicated than just a simple thing of good health. It's the nuances as to what you expect out of it.
Right. And so when I see people, and I think about myself trying to solve the problem as it first comes to me, it's basically just a form of laziness.
Yeah,
right?
That's one form. I mean, they don't really, and they're not really committed. I mean, that's another thing. They just say it's a pipe dream. Everyone would like to have a beautiful body and be gorgeous, and and everyone would like to be a multi-billionaire, whatever. But nobody does anything about it except the few crazy people who do that sort of stuff, right? So these are pipe dreams. They don't really. That's just a game. You want to have it in your life, and maybe you'll luck out, but chances are you won't. But If you actually want to do it, that's totally different. And one of the things I have, as you know from my book, I have a whole chapter saying reasons are bullshit. So one of the ways we lie to ourselves is we have reasons, and we give ourselves reasons for stuff. And the truth is, we don't really know why we do things. Human behavior is very complicated. Most of it is habitual. Most of it, you do something, then you make, if someone says, why'd you do that? You make up a reason for it. And you make up the reason that makes you look good, not bad usually, unless you want to look bad. But so you make up a self-serving reason and you sort of lie to yourself. And you'll never change in your life if you keep believing those reasons, because they're excuses. They're excuses to cover your behavior, which is not functional. So, you have to give up reasons. You have to just say what you do and not worry about the cause of it. I did this or I didn't do that. That's the fact. That's all you know, what you did and didn't do, unless you're blind. But if you're open to yourself, you know what you didn't. And it doesn't matter what the reason is. So you have to say that. And the other thing is you have to understand trying to do something is not the same as doing it. It's two different cases. So you can try and do stuff. You can try and live healthy. You can try and live. I have a friend, my wife has a friend who has just turned 90. I've known her since she was 40. In the last 50 years, she has always been trying to lose weight. She has, for 50 years, been trying to lose weight. But she goes into the store and buys candy and buys ice cream because she can't live without it, But she's always trying to lose weight and talking about losing weight and joining Weight Watchers. And it goes on and on. So, she's trying. That's fine. But she's not doing, okay? And if you're doing, it's totally different. And if you're doing something, even if you find an obstacle, which you do often when you're trying to do something hard, is you walk around it. If you're trying to do something, if you find an obstacle, you're defeated. And that's the difference. So you have to resolve, am I going to try and do it? Then it might or might not happen, or am I going to do it? In which case, it's going to happen. No matter what, you're going to make it happen. So if it's a pipe dream, forget about it. It's not even trying. But if it's something you really want, you have to tell yourself, I'm going to give it I have the intention to do it, no matter what. I'm going to give it the attention it requires, and I'm not going to try, I'm going to do it. And if there are obstacles, I'm going to get around them.
So when I hear that, I know a lot of clients who want to make it way more complicated than that and far more nuanced, and say, like, Bernie really doesn't understand that it's much more complicated than that. There's approach avoidance, there's my childhood, there's all the issues.
They're all good reasons, which means bullshit. When I say it's a good reason, I mean bullshit. Yeah, they're all good reasons. And they may even appear true, but there's not the reason for any one behavior. There's not any reason. It's so complicated, It's so anything. Like if you ask me, why am I talking to you? Why am I on your show? Well, if you asked me that, being a nice guy, I would say, because you invited me. Thank you very much. I really was honored and I'm pleased to do it. But it's so much more complicated. It has to do with everything that has with bloggers in my life and my book and my time and all. And it has to do with my great-great-great-grandparents who had sex. If they had that sex, I wouldn't be on your program, right? So there's a billion reasons for everything. So we take the one that looks good and seems the most reasonable. So the point of being reasonable is to have a reason that seems okay. And then you're a reasonable person. But that's not why you do it. And that's not why you invited me. We don't know why we do these things. We only think we do. But we know what we've done. And then we make up a reason for it. So the reasons are just excuses. And the further you go back in your childhood, the much better reason it is. If you go the further remote it is, it's way, but you don't even know what you did 2 minutes ago, really. You did it. It's such you're so complicated, your brain, your habituation. It's mind-blowing how complicated we are.
Yeah. So one of the things I started doing with my clients after reading your Reasons Are Bullshit chapter is we'd have these group sessions where people kind of talk about their successes and failures. And I started asking, and before I was kind of shying away from asking people why they failed. I felt like it was It was like stepping on landmines. But
Sure.
since reading that chapter, I've really been focusing on getting people to express all the reasons they can't do what they want to do.
Yeah, great.
And it's amazing how all that withers in the sunlight of their own awareness.
That's great. It works very well. Yeah, yeah. I do an exercise I mentioned in the book where I pair people up and I have them give reasons. So my example is always my mouth is dry. And well, why is my mouth dry? Because I'm talking a lot. Right now, my mouth is dry, actually, because I'm talking a lot. Okay. But that's not the reason my mouth is dry. It's so complicated. I had a bottle of wine last night. I'm always dehydrated. My wife's always telling me I don't drink enough. When I go to Burning Man, my urine is not the right color and all that stuff. I'm a kind of dehydrated person. I don't have anywhere near 8 glasses of water or whatever you're supposed to have. So I'm talking. That's a good reason for me to be my mouth to be dry. But there are a lot of people who talk a lot and their mouth doesn't get dry, okay? So it's that kind of thing that you have to understand. And so you do an exercise where you tell your partner just honestly what the reasons are for true things in your life. And your partner tells you that's a good reason, meaning it's bullshit. So they accept every reason you tell you and they just respond. That's a good reason. And that breaks it open for people because they realize all the reasons for their behavior are by and large they don't really know. And some they're more difficult to with, but most of them they realize it's not the reason for the behavior. And it's really good in your group to do that because it gets people move off the dime. It gets them to realize their behavior is what it is. And it's not the excuse that they don't have to keep having it.
Yeah, and I found when I opened the door for it,
yes,
that when they didn't have to feel defensive about the reason, then the reason lost a lot of its luster for them. Yeah. They believe it as long as they have to defend it against something else or someone else or their own self-judgment. But the minute they just list them all freely, they're like, I got nothing.
Yeah, they're not. Their reasons are such nonsense. We should live without them. It's really better not to use them if you don't have to. Just say what you did or don't do, and don't use the reasons at all. I had this funny experience. We had this woman working in one of the offices, and I had a bunch of labels made like to give out reasons of bullshit, and she was like from 2 centuries ago. So she looks at it and she goes, "Oh, what a terrible word." And I go, yeah, reasons. And I really feel that way. Bullshit's a fine word. Reasons is a destructive, bad word. Yeah.
So I got a question for you. Because I was very surprised with the way you started the book, which is you basically say like life has no meaning.
Oh yeah.
Or your daughter has no meaning, or things have no meaning. Yeah. And I think I sort of begin to understand how it relates to the way we hold on to our reasons and the way we hold. But can you explain, like, why was that the prerequisite for you, for anyone who wants to develop the achievement habit and have a successful life? Why do we have to let go of what we think of as the meaning of our life and the things?
Yeah, well, I think you are missing the point as far as I'm concerned. It's not that what we have to realize is we made it up. That it's okay to have a meaning, and we can't help it. We give everything in our life meanings, but it's not preordained. It's not God-given or nature-given, whoever you believe in, or Marx-given. I don't know, whoever gives it to you. It's you made up that reason. And that makes you a god. That makes you a very powerful person. You see, the other way, you're a victim. You're a victim. Like, I have to love my daughter. Like, example, this story in the book of my colleague her daughter was the whole thing in her life. And it's a wonderful daughter. I love her daughter too. Okay, she's a wonderful person. But the point is that this woman who is an incredible professor, an incredible mother, she chose to be an incredible mother. She's not an incredible mother because her genes or her DNA or, you're supposed to be. Because mothers kill, literally, as you know, mothers kill children. Mothers abandon children. Mothers kill them both physically and emotionally. It's a whole issue between mother and daughter. It's not necessarily a wonderful scene. So if you have a wonderful scene between you and you made that up. You created that. That's a very powerful feeling, as opposed to, well, it's just natural. It just came. So what I'm really trying to do, it looks like I'm trying to tear people down. I'm actually trying to empower people. What I'm trying people to understand is they are choosing to give everything in their life a meaning. It has no intrinsic meaning other than what you choose to give it. And so I'm not saying don't have meaning. I'm just saying it doesn't mean anything till you give it the meaning. Okay? And if you understand that, that's very powerful. It's also powerful to get rid of negative stuff. So, we have, if you have a conflict at work with someone or something like that, or you think they're an asshole or something of that nature, you're giving it that meaning. If you see the other side, it changes that totally. There's this book that just was out recently. Some Berkeley professor went to live with people in Louisiana because she wanted to see how people who were on the extreme right are compared to people in Berkeley. And she went there and she met these people and they became good friends and they see the world totally differently. They give it the meaning. They give it government is terrible and all, that kind of stuff. And the woman in Berkeley thinks government is pretty good and should help people. But it's this whole idea of there's no intrinsic meaning to either way. You can choose one way or the other, and people do that. And things like politics, you sort of see that. But it's true in every personal relationship. It's true in your meaning. It's true about food. You give the food the meaning. Some people don't give the food any meaning at all, but they're giving it a meaning that, it's meaningless. But you're giving it a meaning that is important for your health, and you're choosing to do that. And that's a powerful thing. And that people in your, who think the way you do should feel very proud if they've chosen to do that. It does that. So my son is a vegetarian, for example. Well, he chose to do that. He grew up in a meat-eating family, and when he was a kid, he loved hamburgers and all. And at some point, he was influenced by a girlfriend, and it totally changed his life. So, but he chose that, and that's a powerful thing to be, and that's the point about it. So you should not read that chapter that I'm trying to take anything away from you. I'm trying to empower you. Okay, that's what I hope you'd get out of it. So read it again and see if that means.
Well, yeah. So and you follow along with us in a later chapter about how you use language.
Yes.
So to me, it is the concept of radical responsibility. Sure. Like very few people I know, including myself, really want that kind of responsibility. Yeah. Like, and part of me doesn't like when I hear, like billionaire Silicon Valley people saying you create your reality, because I'm thinking, well, that's easy for you to say. Yeah. And yet, a good friend of mine, told me, that every morning he wakes up and thinks about, do I want to stay with my wife and kids today, or do I want to go off? Yeah. And I was shocked until he said, like, the reason I do that is if I stay, I want to make sure that I've made a conscious, deliberate choice. And, I saw how empowering that was to entertain the other possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, first of all, these Silicon Valley guys are not in as good a shape as you may think they are, okay? Lots of them have lots of problems and are not really wonderful, in my opinion, wonderful people, although many are, but many are not. So I think it's true to understand. I mean, it's if someone is wealthy and they really made it, then you think, well, they're not in my league, or there's a different life. I can't learn anything. However, I think it's not true. It's true. I grew up with a lot of poor people. I grew up in a kind of working class neighborhood, and I didn't have much money until late in my life either. And I think it's still true at every level. There were people in my neighborhood who were always on unemployment. There were people, criminals, that people went to jail. With drugs. It was all that stuff went on. And you could really see that people gave their life the meaning. And the same circumstances, the same people. It's so interesting. I have the story in the book which really nails it for me. I had this really close colleague who had Alzheimer's. And he eventually, his wife couldn't handle him, so she put him in an institution that was about an hour away. And she would go a few times a week, but I would go with her, say, once a month or once every 3 weeks. And it was an incredible experience. It was just love and joy and he was, he didn't recognize me. He was in some other world. He wasn't, he wasn't with us, and he wasn't the same person. And he was still someone I had a lot of love for. And at the same time, I had another colleague who was essentially the same circumstances. And he also had a loving wife and all that. But she treated it like it was the world's biggest tragedy. She essentially kept him locked up in a dark space all the time. And when I went over to visit, I couldn't wait to get out. I couldn't wait. I just felt so bad for him and for the whole circumstance. So here were two people whose circumstances were really identical. Literally, I couldn't tell you how identical they were in terms of background, in terms of everything, in terms of profession. And one, it was a joyous, loving thing before he died. And the other, it was like a tragedy before he died. And so it was so clear how each wife had chosen to give it their own meaning. And both meanings are valid. I understand it as a tragedy, but I also understand it's a way of a human connection. And when you see it in those stark terms, it transcends this whole idea of millionaires and paupers and all that, because everyone has the circumstances of their life. And there are a lot of very rich people who are very unhappy and very, and commit suicide and all that. And there are a lot of poor people who are not. So it's a kind of interesting thing. I know it sounds crazy, and I sound like I've gone over to the la-la side of, everything is rosy. And I don't feel that way, but, I have a lot of problems in my life. A lot of stuff doesn't work in my life. I've been married for 60 years. A lot of stuff doesn't work in my marriage. A lot of stuff, there are things with my children I wish would be different. There are things with my job I wish, and I think I have a great job. I feel I have a wonderful life. But everyone has issues with it, but it depends how you do it. I'd say most of the people I work with are really glad to be here. There are a few people who their whole life is an agony. Everything is a problem. Everything is bad. They see it. And essentially they have the same job. They have the same job. It's so interesting. I had a friend who used to use my house as a sleepover. He lived in Berkeley and taught at Santa Cruz. He'd sleep in my house, and he'd say to me, "Your life is so wonderful. And he had the same exact life, and he wasn't married. He had all these girlfriends. and it was so funny. It's just the way he has built personality, and he still is. I'm still a close friend of mine. He has so many issues. His life has and it's like, that's the way you treat stuff. You really get to give it a meaning. It's so interesting.
Right. It reminds me of, the ultimate extreme example is Viktor Frankl and the concentration camps.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot because my mother was a Holocaust survivor and came out, and I didn't know her, obviously until she was in her, late 40s, early 50s, and she was always a very suspicious, angry person. Yeah. And I just assumed, the Holocaust did that to her. Hitler did that to her. And then I met other people who came out of that experience and, tried to make peace in Palestine between Jews and Arabs and kind of had an entirely different take.
Yeah. So it's true. And it's not unreasonable that it's really reasonable your mother should be that way. But she doesn't have to be that way. And it's the kind of thing that's really interesting. And, when you get these counterexamples of people who've kind of transcended that experience and gone on beyond that to be different, it's kind of amazing. It's just, there's so many circumstances in life where you see people that are almost identical, and then even I know some identical twins, which is really interesting, who are very different in terms of, and they're genetically they're very close, and yet they're very different in many ways, and they're choosing somehow to do that. Yeah.
Right. So one of the things I love about your approach and about the design systems, design thinking approach is that it simplifies every step of the way. So one of the things you talked about is the gun test.
Yes.
And, a lot of the time when I'm teaching people, and my partner and I are teaching people about healthy food, everyone wants to know about all the details and how many grams of this. Or when we talk about exercise, they want to know which watch they should get and what apps.
Yes.
And we constantly tell them, just do something.
Yeah.
And you like, if there's one theme in the book that really hits home for me, it's just bias for action.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that and
Yes.
how it plays into the design process?
Yes. Yeah. Well, bias for action is this whole idea of not thinking things to death and not planning too much and just doing, even if you don't know really what you're doing and you know you're going to make mistakes. So we actually have a class called Launchpad, which is a 10-week class at Stanford. It's a graduate class. And if they let you in the class, they screen you, but you're supposed to have some idea of a company you want to start. And the whole idea is no planning is allowed. And it's not a class. It's actually you're starting a business. It's not a class, buddy. And what you got to do is shape up. And in 5 weeks, you got to launch. And you don't have time to plan. You just have time to do. And when you do, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to correct your mistakes. Well, there are miracles that have happened in that class. One company just sold to LinkedIn for $92 million. It was started in 5 weeks. Okay. So it's just hard. Whereas in the business school, they plan. So the whole idea of bias towards action is just do it, and it's okay if it's wrong, but you'll learn faster than if you sit around and you plan. And it's just a matter of going out and doing it. The joke is my wife is not my biggest fan in terms of reading my book and doing all this stuff. She tolerates all of that. And we were in Panama together, and we were walking together, and she had a jacket, which was kind of warm. We were in Panama City in the old town, and she somehow dropped the jacket. But we didn't realize where. And we stopped. And I said, I'll go back and find it. She said, oh, you'll never find it. That's great. I said, well, just sit down here and I'll see what I can do. So I go back and I walk for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, retracing the steps. And then I look down a big alley and I see a guy on a bike sort of holding up a jacket, which could be her jacket. And he looks at me and I start running. And I chase him for like 4 blocks. And as he gets through, then I corner him. And then he says to me in Spanish, he says, I just found it. And I believe it. He thought I was going to get him because he stole it. He said, I just found it. And I said, good. And he gave it to me. And I actually gave him $2 just to make him feel good. And I come back about a half hour later, and my wife says, now I understand bias for action. But that's not what we usually mean about bias. But it really means just do it. Even if you don't know, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know I was going to find it or not find it. But I would, if I hadn't gone, I would have never found it. You know what I mean? It's just a matter of going and doing stuff, and in doing, miracles do happen. And that was, was a small miracle. Wouldn't have mattered if we didn't find it or not. But it's that same idea, and we do that with companies. We do that with things all the time. And you learn. See, most of the time, you don't really know what the problem is. Most people live in a world that they think, you go to school, they tell you 2 + 2 equals what? And you go, well, I have 2 and 2, and that equals 4. So you know what you start with, you know what you're supposed to end up with. It's called the right answer. But life isn't that way. Life is you don't even usually know where you are, for sure. And you want to go somewhere, but you don't really kind of know where you want to go. You want to start a company. You want to do something. You want something. But it's not clear. And design thinking is perfect for that because it's a kind of what we call like a cone of opportunity. You don't know where you're going to end up. You just want to end up somewhere good. Well, you got to start, even though you don't know where you're going. It doesn't matter if you don't know where you're going. It doesn't matter which way you go. Just go, and you'll get opportunity. You'll get experiences, and that's really, and it's a powerful thing. It is so powerful, as opposed to sitting and thinking and doing. And just do it. Dare to do it.
Right. So it sounds like a lot of what you do in your classes is you kind of unschool people.
Well, we unleash people in a way because.
Right. But I mean, I'm thinking where kids have a bias for action.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm trying to think where do we lose that? We lose it in the 2 + 2 = 4 world, because if you try 5, you get slapped.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I knew a Nobel Prize winner. He's the guy in the book who gave me an F on a course, and he told me once. I actually got friendly with him afterward. He told me his son will never be in his league because his son doesn't ask why 1 and 1 isn't 11. Okay, so that's the mindset. Okay, but at any rate, the point is, I have a friend who wrote a book called Creative Confidence, and the whole idea there is we all have confidence to do creative things when we're kids, and it gets squashed out of us by stop daydreaming. Howard, stop daydreaming, do your work, or Howard, what, that picture's no good that you're drawing. You're not an artist. So we get kind of suppressed a little bit, but we still have a lot of that in us, and what we try to do here is we unleash it. So it doesn't matter if you can draw well or not. Just draw. Just express it with a drawing. We don't care if it's a good drawing or a bad drawing. We're not going to give you a commission or anything. We just want you to express your ideas as best you can. The more you do it, the better you're going to get. And you have to overcome this fear, which is put that you're no good or you're ashamed to do it. And it does work with a lot of people. And also, to be at Stanford, most students have had good records. They're not used to failing or not doing things wrong. So it's a little hard in the beginning to get them to do something which they know might not come out right. But it is so liberating when you do that. And it for some it flips, they flip. For some it doesn't change them. They even reject it. But for most of them, it's really a freeing thing. And for some, it just makes them new people. It just totally changes their whole lives and what they do and who they are. It just opens something that was buried in them, which they was suppressed, really. So yeah, it's good.
So the hack that I took away from the book that has been most profound for me is when you talk about, if you're in a boring meeting, be amazed at how boring it is.
Yeah, that's right.
If you're depressed, be awestruck by your depression.
Yeah.
And I've taken like stand-up classes, and so now, and you mentioned like, well, how would a comedian do it? And I'm now doing that for the awful things in my life.
Yeah.
And it's so liberating, and it's so playful, because there's nothing in the world that isn't amazing if you have the right attitude about it.
It's so interesting. And I had a hard time with the depression one. My publisher didn't want to let me put it in there, but I have some experience with that, and I do feel it is work. It's a little harder, but it's just a matter of what happens is people snowball. They get depressed about being depressed. You know what I mean? But if you can just objectively look at yourself and say, I'm really such shitty shape. Really, I can't get out of bed. I don't feel like feel like maybe killing myself and all that. Wow. I have never been this depressed before. This is fantastic. If you can make that turn, it really, it does work. It really does. I don't have much, personally, I don't have much depression, okay? Maybe once or twice in my life for a few hours. I've been very fortunate that way. But my father was manic depressed. My wife has a lot of depression. I've been through a lot of depression in my life. I see it around a lot. I really feel it works, and it works on anything. It's like even like the dish, the simple thing like people hate to watch. I don't know why they hate to watch dishes. If you go there, you say, wow, the water's so warm. It's so great. And the suds, this is fun. This hasn't had this much fun since I'm a kid. It's as opposed to it's a chore. We just did the garage. The garage cleaning is a big thing in people's lives. My wife, she keeps saying, she doesn't have a bias towards action. So she keeps saying, we ought to clean the garage. We ought to clean the garage. Finally, I get so tired. I said, we're cleaning the garage on Saturday. Are you in with me or not? She says, okay, yeah. So Saturday comes, she finds we don't do it. But the next Saturday, we do it. So we just did it the last Saturday, okay? And we did a good job and all that. It was great, and I enjoyed it all. It was like just about, and then we go back. Of course, she sees the half empty. She says, "Well, we didn't finish. We didn't clean all the shelves, but we cleaned a lot of the garage, and it was fine. We enjoyed ourselves, didn't we? Yeah, it was okay. Yeah, it was, and it's just the attitude you do it. So if you're not going to have a good attitude, don't do it. Don't do it. You don't have to do anything. There's nothing you really have to do. And if you're going to do it, get the attitude of doing it. It's going to be a much more pleasant experience.
Right, and I love how you help us swap out the language. Instead of "I have to" is "I want to."
Yeah. So that's important. I mean, it sounds trivial, and it's okay if you slip once in a while. I mean, I have a problem. I teach this stuff, so you have all these students who watch me, and if I say a wrong word, they correct me, and I hate that. I just hate that. It's just, don't correct anyone else. Just correct yourself. Fix the world. If you fix it, it's fine. So I can't give a reason for anything. I'm like intimidated because of teaching all this stuff. And it is really useful. And it's like but instead of and is so powerful. People use but so much more. And but is a blocking thing, and it's sort of you can't do it. And is it promotes activity. It promotes doing so. And it's usually the situation is usually that things are not in contrast. But implies a contradiction, a contrast to each other. And implies two things that exist simultaneously, and they may be choices. They somewhat don't relate to each other,
Right. So how would you use and but, sort of as an example? Let's say for someone in my world who's trying to lose weight, but they can't stop eating chocolate.
Yeah. So I'm trying to lose weight and I can't stop eating. Okay, that's really a much better example than I'm trying to lose weight but I can't stop eating. Okay, because now you have two situations. Are you trying to lose weight or are you not trying to lose weight? Yes or no? Okay, and can you stop eating or can't you stop eating? That's another situation. Okay, so you can lose weight. They have nothing to do with each other, but it's empowering. You see, if you lose weight, it's like I give you another example. I was at a talk in Japan. The room was full of people, and at the end, this guy who took my course, a Japanese professor, he goes, "Bernie, I love your talk. It was a great talk, but." I go, "Suishi, and." So, because if you say but, it's a squash. But I love your talk, and I didn't understand one of the things, or I don't agree with it, all that. You understand the energy in that? The and the but are totally different. But is a put down. It's a destructive thing. So it's the same thing. If you're trying to lose weight and you have these things, you're still trying to lose weight. But means you're not trying to lose weight. It's the excuse. It's the reason why you can't lose weight. You understand? There's action. The and is an action on both ends. It doesn't squash it, but squashes it. I'd like to go to a party, but I'm too tired. But I'd like to go to a party and I'm too tired. Okay? And it's still a possibility I might go to the party being tired. The other way, I've squashed the possibility I'm going to go to the party. Okay, so it's a matter of what you want to do. If you've done improv, it's exactly this thing. In improv, you're always supposed to say yes when your turn. It's yes and. Yeah. It's not no but. If you do no but in improv, they'll kill you when the audience leaves. Yeah. Yes and promotes conversation, promotes activity. You want to have a party? Yeah, let's have a party. Let's have a band too. Well, how would you like that? And yeah, let's have dancing, Howard. And let's make sure there's a lot of booze. Or, as opposed to, you want to have a party? Yeah, but I'm a little tired. But I don't know. Have a band, but it costs too much to have a band. It's that whole thing. So, and is an empowering thing, but is a disempowering thing. And you have to try it out. And it sounds weird. It does. Our common thing is we use but much more than we should. And we use and much less than we should. And you can actually try. I actually had this funny thing with my publisher. They went through and they took out. I had no buts in the book, and they put hands. She went out to have this other thing, which help sounds like you're helpless, and assist is a good thing. So this editor went through and took out all my things, and then she got to the chapter where I explained this stuff, and she goes, "Oh my God!" She sends me an email. "Oh my gosh, Bernie, I wish that chapter were earlier." I just went over and changed them back again. It is funny. It seems a little unusual because we're so used to using but, we're so used to using help and stuff. But it does make a difference. And you slip, I slip, and it's still really useful to understand that. Yeah, sure. And certainly have to and want to is really very interesting. You don't have to do anything, really. You want to do it. If you're doing it, you want to do it. So I have to go to school. My father's making me, these kids. I have to go. I have my parents have made. It's bullshit. If they didn't want to go, they would be a truant. I didn't go to school. A lot of us are truant, If they didn't want to go, just be a truant. It's so funny. They don't have to do it. They do it, and they put the blame on the parents. They grind.
Right. It reminds me of a line from Marshall Rosenberg, who's the founder of nonviolent communication. He says, "You can make your kids wish they had, but they can make you wish you hadn't. You made them wish they had."
That's good. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So we're at the end of the hour. So I want to respect our time together. I want to say there's three things that I would have liked to ask, but I think and I think they're very well explained in the book. One is the idea you talk about the overreach of science.
Yes.
And right how we can limit ourselves because of a study we heard or read about, and I find that utterly beautiful. I don't think you talk about it enough. I would like an entire book on that.
Science proves. The science does. I mean, I love science. I've published over 200 technical papers in my life. It's just, they just overreach it. It doesn't prove anything. It maybe suggests something and all that, but it just used, the science has proved your brain will work better if you do this exercise. Buy my thing. I hate that stuff. Yeah. I don't want to sound anti-scientific. I think science is good. I just wish it could prove all the things they said it does.
Yeah. Well, I get most of the scientists don't think it proves it. It's the journalists and the bloggers who
use it. Yeah, they use it. Yeah.
If I could ask one final question.
Sure.
So a key part of design is prototyping. And I'm just curious what that looks like for lifestyle change. And I think we can see that prototyping is around bias for action, and it's around not being afraid of failure. But what would it look like for someone who's trying to change their lifestyle to get healthier?
Yeah, you just try something. So, for example, let's say you want to only eat carrots or something like that. So what you do is you're not going to suddenly be able to do it only, probably. So you prototype, you start to do it. You'll have a carrot every day at noon, let's say. You'll try out, you'll test it out in a small way, and you'll see if it works. And if it works, you'll continue going that way. And if it doesn't work, you'll go to turnips or whatever you want to go to. So the prototyping idea is not... It's just to test it and to get a future direction. That's the purpose of a prototype, to test out your idea, see if it works, and to see which way you want to go from it to get some information. That's really what it's about. And in terms of human behavior, you test out your thing. So if I want to ask you for a date, I may, be afraid to do that. So I do some test of that. I call you up, I have a little conversation with you, and if it goes well and you're nice, I go and bring you some flowers the next time, and then maybe the third time I'll ask you for a date. But if clearly you don't want anything, I'll go and find someone else to ask. It's that kind of thing. It's testing it out and getting some information about it.
Great. And so many people, instead of doing that, will read another book on nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, that's right. They want
right. So it's about personalized, actionable learning based on what you've done, rather than just accretion of theory.
Absolutely. I get a lot of emails about my book. And I got one from this guy's in Florida, and he listens to my book when he goes to work every day on his commute. And he has a problem. He wants to start a business. He has all these things he wants to do, he doesn't do. He says, your book is great. It changed my life. What other book would you suggest I read? And of course, I said, stop reading books and go do some of this stuff.
Yeah.
But some people get this. They go from book to book. You got to get out there and do it. That's the bias towards action stuff. You can't prepare. You'll never be ready. You're as ready today as you'll ever be for anything. And most people think there's going to be a magic moment when they're ready. And there's always more to learn. There's always more to do. There's always more money to accumulate. You just do it by doing it.
Right on. Well, Bernie, thank you so much. I want to mention the name of your book, which I think I only mentioned in passing, so people can go get it. It's called The Achievement Habit. And it came out, 2016?
It's 2 years. 2 years. 2 years. 2015 July. Yeah.
2015.
Yeah.
So it's an amazingly generous.
In 14 languages, also, incidentally.
How many?
14 other languages than English. Yeah.
Wow. So
this came out in Spanish and Indonesian.
Yeah, we've lost our competitive advantage.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, thank you, Howard. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed the conversation, and great to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for all you do and for writing that book and making it so available to everyone, and for taking the time to be on the podcast.
Yeah, well, it's a big part of my life. I'm glad to share it. Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Be well. Eat healthy.
You too. Be well. Bye-bye. If you enjoyed this episode of the Plant Yourself podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. For more information about the Big Change Program, led by me and Josh Lajani, visit bigchangeprogram.com. And be sure to check out the show notes for today's episode with links to everything we talked about at plantyourself.com/226. If you're new to the show, you can catch up on 225 archived episodes over at plantyourself.com. And if you get the podcast, but not the Big Change Bulldog, you can sign up and also get the Oatmeal Project report at plantyourself.com/oatmeal. If you'd like to support the podcast and have more time and typing chops than money, consider transcribing an episode. This will allow us to spread our advocacy to the deaf and hearing impaired, and also to provide a convenient format for everyone to consume the content. We have a new transcript. Thanks to Kelly Machia, it's number 197, Scott Carney on Extreme Cold and Facing the World as It Is. Scott is an investigative reporter who hung out with Wim Hof and a bunch of other people who are exploring the extremes of human capacity to not only deal with difficult environmental conditions, but to thrive in them, to reverse autoimmune diseases, to get ourselves functioning the way we were meant to function. It's a fascinating conversation. His book, What Doesn't Kill Us, is a fantastic read, and you can get that, again, the transcript, as well as listen to that episode at plantyourself.com/197. If you would like to support the show and you're not such a great typist, you can share this and other episodes on social media or via email. You can write that iTunes review, or you can become a patron of the show with an ongoing contribution at plantyourself.com. Click on Patreon in the right sidebar. In garden news, we've gotten okra the last couple of weeks. I harvested the last of the eggplants yesterday. I chopped some basil down practically to the stems, and they have revived and are looking very nice for a fall pesto push. We sowed beets and lettuce, and I'm starting to see the kale emerging from the ground. In running news, I have about 5 weeks till my 50K, but I'm going to take a little detour to do a fun run for my friend Ryan, who's a race director for the first time for the North Carolina Pickled Peppers, Pickled Peter Pepperfest, the Pepperfest Flying Pepper Run, which is going to be in Chapel Hill on September 24th. If you're interested, if you're in the area and you want to do a fun 4-mile run that includes stations where you have to taste different North Carolina peppers and the optional shot of flying pepper vodka at the finish line, you can go to pepperfestnc.org. Big thanks to Will Ridenauer for allowing me to use his beautiful song, Sabali Don, the Dance of Peace. You can find more of Will's music at his website, willridenauer.com. And last and not least, last and most, thanks also to all you Plant Yourself podcast patrons. You know who you are, but I still love saying your names. And here we go. Take us out. Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Morrow, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennedy, Melissa Cobb, Rachel Behrens, Christine Nielsen, Tina Sharp, Dean Ahern, Jen Filkanowski, David Bizek, Mysterious Michelle X, Elspeth Feldman, Victoria Dolman, Ova, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Landry, Josina, Julian, Roland, Stu Dolnick, Sarah Durkis, Rhymes with Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Leanne Peterson, Janet Selby, Claire Adams, Tom Franzek, Jeanette Benham, Gila, Sir David Donahue, Blair Seibert, Dorona Vizov, Gio, and Carlin Argentati, Jody Friesner, Ruth Ann Funderburg, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, the equally mysterious Tracy Z. Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, Rhymes with Cinnamon, Nick Harper, Stephanie Holness, Martha Bergner, Nicole Ramsey, Susan Ahmad, Molly Levine, the Inscrutable Harry R., Susan Laverty, the Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Sharf, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Ashley Corker, and Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch of Plant Happy Oregon, Sabine Kurtzals, Nigel Davies, Marion Plum, Teresa Copold, Shell Rutledge, Julian Watkins, and Breed O'Connell for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for this week. As always, be well, my friends.